So Steam. You know, the same Steam that's the world's biggest and best PC gaming platform? Yeah, that Steam. So it's well known for having this great refund policy where you can refund any game, no questions asked. There are, however, a few caveats. First of all, to refund a game on Steam, you'll need to have owned it for less than a total of 2 weeks, or 14 days. And second, and most important to this video, you need to have a total playtime of under 2 hours. So I thought, hey, it might be fun to play new games that I have zero experience with, play it for less than 2 hours total, and see if it passes the test of being a decent enough game to continue playing despite knowing that I'll no longer be able to refund it. Without further ado, this is the Steam Refund Review. And today we'll be reviewing Dead Cells. Dead Cells is a roguelite Metroidvania developed and published by Motion Twin and was released in 2018. The Steam description reads, Dead Cells is a roguelite Metroidvania, hey that's what I just said, inspired action platformer. You'll explore a sprawling, ever-changing castle, assuming you're able to fight your way past its keepers in 2D Souls-like combat. No checkpoints, kill, die, learn, repeat. The game has a staggering 97% overall positive rating on Steam, which I think is the highest rated game on Steam I've ever reviewed so far. I'm really trying not to set my expectations too high, but man, with an overall review score like this, the game is sure to wow me, right? So I've actually had Dead Cells on my wish list literally since it was released, so I'm pretty excited to finally jump into it and decide if it really lives up to the hype that it gets. The only thing that really worries me about this game initially is that I've played a few Metroidvanias in the past, and so far the genre hasn't really impressed me that much as it does for some other people. And I've also only enjoyed a few other roguelikes in the past, including Slay the Spire, which I also reviewed in this series, if you want to go check that out by the way. So we'll just have to see if a game that combines two genres that I have mixed feelings about will feel worth the price for me. So, right off the bat, I can tell that the atmosphere of this game is going to be right up my alley. I love games with dark medieval themes, and this seems to be just that. I started off as this green blob falling from the ceiling and seemingly possessing a headless dead body on the ground. After this, I jump up to meet this female knight character who tells me that I'm unable to fully die and sends me on my way. The game then gives me the option of choosing between 3 different types of items, of which I can only pick up 2. There are these red melee weapons, the purple projectile weapons, and the green tactical weapons. After choosing the red sword and the purple bow, I was off to the races, or the dungeon, or whatever. Here were just a few of my initial impressions as I jumped right into the gameplay. Well, for the second episode in a row, we're playing another pixelated graphics game. As mentioned in my Stardew Valley video, I really do like pixelated graphics, but obviously these types of pixelated graphics are so much different than what you'd find in Stardew Valley. I really like this game's art style. It simply looks awesome while seeming retro yet modern at the same time, if that's possible. As far as the gameplay, wow, I can already say that the gameplay is super impressive. Even when just jumping in with the most basic weapons, everything just feels great. I played with controller rather than mouse and keyboard as that's what the game recommends, and the controls feel extremely tight and responsive. At the beginning of the game, I almost felt that it was too easy, but I quickly found out that that wasn't the case later on down the road. And as far as the game's theme and setting, I've already mentioned that I love games with dark themes and medieval settings, so this game is already hitting all the right notes for me. The enemy designs are fresh and look great. There are lots of cool details like dead bodies all over, minimal natural lighting, which makes it feel kind of dreary and hopeless, just like my life. So as we dig deeper here, I can tell that Dead Cells seems to have a lot of interconnected gameplay mechanics, and as mentioned before, this is a roguelite Metroidvania. So for those of you who live in a hole under the ground, as a roguelite, this game basically starts you over from the beginning every time you die, but you'll be able to improve your character little by little so that you can get further and further on each run. And as a Metroidvania, the game has a lot of verticality, different paths to take, objects you can interact with in the environment, and sections of the level that you can't get to until you get a specific upgrade. The first starting level takes place in a dungeon of sorts, and the enemies are pretty easily defeated and don't do much damage to you at all. As your character traverses through the environment, you will jump, fall through platforms, use dodging mechanics to avoid attacks, and perform either close range, melee, or long range attacks depending on what weapons you pick up along the way. Enemies will often drop items when they're defeated, and sometimes they'll drop things like gold, which can be used to purchase new items from the merchant or open new pathways in the level, special weapons that will either do more DPS or have some sort of special effect like setting enemies on fire, that's pretty cool, or cells, which can be used between the different levels by talking to this creepy dude to work towards permanent character upgrades that will help you progress further in each future run. While traversing levels, you'll also find some secrets like small secret areas that give you extra gold, chests that unlock new weapons for the run, or blueprints for new weapons that you can work towards unlocking by spending cells with the weird guy that I mentioned a second ago. You'll also find these upgrade scroll things that will upgrade a specific stat, whether it be melee attack, ranged attacks, or tactical skills. These scroll things will also give you a health increase, which is super helpful later on down the road, as it doesn't take long for enemies to start doing some massive damage with each hit in later levels. And speaking of how much damage enemies do, when I first started playing the game, I was thinking to myself, the game almost seemed too easy. I was destroying every enemy and barely taking any damage. Well, then I made it to one of the second areas and immediately realized the game was a lot more difficult than I had originally thought. I pretty much got destroyed instantly by these dudes with Wolverine-like claws or whatever they are. And when you die, it seems that you lose all your weapons, stat upgrades, gold, and cells. Later on though, I got a permanent upgrade that made it so that you start the next round with some of your gold that you lost, which was pretty cool. There are also some permanent upgrades that will cause random weapons to spawn that you can choose from at the beginning of the run, as long as you have that weapon unlocked. I'm really curious to find out just how many weapons are available in this game, as it seemed like there are quite a few to choose from and lots of cool different abilities for each weapon. It also seems that you can mix and match weapons to make some pretty sweet builds. That's one of my favorite things in video games. In my favorite run, and the one that I progressed the furthest in, I was wielding this giant greatsword that also fired a projectile every time I swung, and the other weapon that I had was literally a dual frying pan that hit super fast and released this giant poison cloud that did damage to enemies over time. Aside from these main hand weapons, there are also supporting weapons that came in the form of things like cold bombs that froze enemies that I could throw, this trap thing that would hold enemies in place, or this turret sort of thing that released these razor discs to damage enemies. The game is also gracious enough to give you a health flask a la Dark Souls that is able to be upgraded to be used multiple times in one run. Another aspect of the game that I found really cool were the mutations, which were buffs to the character that would last for the remainder of the run. It would do things like reduce cooldowns, enable you to do more damage, more consecutive hits you got in, and so on. In proper Metroidvania fashion, it seems there are also these items that you can discover that will allow you to explore more of the map as time goes on, such as this weird vine grower thing that allowed me to sprout these giant towering vines from the ground in certain spots that I was able to use to climb up to find some new secret areas. Some of the other gameplay elements I encountered were some minor platforming challenges, obstacle dodging, and big boss battles that I could tell were a lot of fun, even though I was only able to experience just one of them. I think that pretty much covers the basics of the gameplay, but let me just say again that the way the controls were executed in this game made it feel so amazing to play. I wasn't sure exactly what triggered it, but at times I would gain these speed boosts and my character would just be zooming from one area to another. The attacks are super responsive and each different weapon has a totally different feel, but they all feel amazing. And I gotta say, I think one of the favorite things that the game did was allow me to destroy doors every time I had to cross through them, whether it be by dashing through them or attacking them with my melee weapon. Does anybody actually just open the door normally in this game? It's just so much fun to break it down or dash through it instead. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the game's value. I usually base this section on how much gameplay time I can assume that you can get from a specific game, as well as howlongtobeat.com and Steam reviews, and I take those numbers and determine if the dollar per hour price seems reasonable. Based on these metrics, I can honestly say that this game seems to be more than fairly priced. I can easily tell and understand that literally hundreds of hours can be poured into this game. And the game only has a $25 price tag on Steam, which I initially thought was going to be overpriced, but after playing, I can say that's simply not the case. I would say that this game is definitely worth the price for those interested in this type of game. And as a side note, I've even seen this game on sale on more than one occasion, so if you can pick it up for an even lower price, it'll likely be an absolute steal for most people. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, Metroidvanias and roguelites haven't always hit a home run for me in my book. I've enjoyed some, but they're just not my favorite games in the world. That being said, this game is amazing, man. The only reason that I stopped playing before the 2-hour mark was because the purposes of this review and because I had just died on a long run just before hitting the 2-hour mark. I was honestly so engrossed in the game that if I hadn't died on this run when I did, I likely would have blown past the 2-hour mark because of how much fun I was having. You can tell it's just one of those games where if you die, you just want to pick up your controller one more time and say, just one more run. And then before you know it, it's like 5 a.m. and you're going to be having to get ready for work in like 2 hours. So to rate this game on my experience so far in the 108 minutes I was able to play, I would give this game a very solid 9 out of 10. This game exudes atmosphere, and as mentioned before, it just feels fun to play. It's hard to achieve that feeling sometimes, but Dead Cells definitely succeeds in doing so. To me, when rating this game based on my replay it or refund it scale, this is definitely a replay it. I don't think that there was a single thing in this game that I genuinely disliked. To me, the only thing that I could see someone complaining about in this game is that it seems like it could definitely be a little bit of a grind, which I know can turn some people off to games like this, but I like sinking countless hours into grinding and the slow and steady progression. I can't wait to keep playing to see what kinds of awesome builds or loadouts I can use to conquer the levels in the game, and seeing all the awesome bosses that I'm sure are in store for me. Thank you all so much for watching to this point of the video. If you enjoyed, I really hope that you'll consider subscribing. I have a lot more games planned for the future, so stay tuned. Supermerce out.